and welcome to the Your Good News podcast with me, Katherine Getty. It's easy to believe the news around us, that the world is dark and the future is the same. But what if we chose something different? What if we chose to find the good news in each day? This podcast is a collection of interviews with friends, mentors, colleagues on their good news. From business to health to politics and everything in between, it's my hope that you leave with a boost and find your good news. As school bells begin to ring around the country, we have a special episode with a new friend, Morgan Mancini. Morgan serves as a teacher in a middle school in Connecticut, and she is such a treat. I have no doubt you'll enjoy this episode. Here we go. All right. Well, I am so excited for this next episode. Morgan and I met with air quotes, through the home turf community. And if you haven't listened to my episode with Julie Fair, do so after this one. But Morgan and I began talking through like a text chain, and slowly we became friends. Shout out Mayor of Easttown. It's not about a bunny. But Morgan has been just such a cheerleader, and we have, like I said, never met. And I am so appreciative. And she is a teacher, like I said in the beginning at the outset. And I'm such a cheerleader of her infectious energy, and I want to hear more about her story. I am so grateful for Home Turf for bringing new people into our lives. So without further ado, let's go. Morgan, welcome.
Thank you so much, Katherine. This is so great.
I'm just really excited. I feel like,
Me too.
We've been friends in the virtual world. We're extending it into a new world, and now everyone gets to hear all amazing things. So let's start with the same question I ask every guest. What is your good news?
So I have a twofold good news to share. So I have like the good news that I mentally prepared in the one little facet of my brain that I know we're going to really dig into. But then I also have the good news that just developed yesterday. And that is that I went into the city for the first time in 2 years or so, and kind of felt like a normal human being for a little while, which was really great. And I think that's kind of rejuvenated me because my real life is going to start in a few weeks too. So I kind of needed like the little pep to get ready.
Yeah. Was it like busy in New York, or was it kind of quiet?
I mean,
like, what was it like? I'm curious.
Yeah. Haphazardly walked through Times Square, which we really didn't want to, but it was packed like usual. Like that felt very much like no pandemic exists and things were kind of just status quo. But as we I went to the Van Gogh exhibit. So as we kind of got
very cool
further away from like Midtown, it was very eerie. It was like you did not see the families walking around like you usually do. You didn't see like the older people walking around. It was definitely the people who were on the street definitely had a purpose, and it wasn't really anybody like moseying around.
Yeah.
So
it must have been nice.
It was interesting. It was nice. It was really cool.
It's like funny.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's funny that it's like you never thought that being in packed Times Square would like feel good. And I'm kind of like, that sounds basic in a weird way.
Yeah,
but,
we looked around and we were like, this is cool. Like, this is what life is supposed to be like. And then I was with a friend of mine and we both looked at each other and we're like, okay, we're done now.
We're going to run away.
Yeah. Yeah. But then my other good news is that, I'm going back to work really soon. I'm done for the summer. I will have my 6th group of kids at this particular school that I'm working in. And we're going back as of right now, as of the moment that you and I are talking, we're going back full time. We are going back with masks on.
Yeah.
There are still some like social distancing rules that are going to be in place. But for the most part, we are trying to make it as normal as possible.
As an experience as possible.
Yeah.
And remind me, what grade are you teaching?
So I teach 6th. So I teach the first group of little kids that come into middle school.
Oh, they're so excited.
My school is 6th, 7th, and 8th. So they're really coming in and getting accustomed to a whole new way of learning and moving around a building. And they're not the big man on campus like they were in elementary school. Now they're like the little fish swimming in the really big pond, but they are, for the most part, very excited to be there. One thing that I did notice, coming out of teaching through a year and a half of a pandemic is that kids are super excited to be in school, which is really fulfilling for us as teachers because it used to be the flip flop. It used to be like we had to pull out all the tips and tricks. to get them excited to be there. And last year we really noticed that they were really just happy to be in the building when they were in the building, because those days were few and far between too.
I know we're going to delve into like what last year was like. And I said this kind of before, but my mom and my sister-in-law are teachers. And I've always grown up thinking that teachers are literal heroes. But especially in the last year, the fact that you've had to be flexible, probably on a day basis, of figuring out how can I engage and help these students continue to grow is very inspiring. I mean, how did you start as a teacher? Let's set the foundation.
So I like to always kind of say that my journey wasn't like a typical teacher's journey. I went to college for education. I always knew that I wanted to be a teacher. And I went to a school that had a teaching program built right into their bachelor's program.
Oh, cool.
So a lot of schools, you will do a 4-year bachelor's, and then you'll have to kind of either go right for your master's and be certified, or kind of do other things to get the certification that take a little bit longer. But my college actually gave me my certification with my diploma. So it was all kind of wrapped into one. And a lot of times people think, oh, you finished college, then you're going to go get a job. But it was not that easy for me. I finished school in a time where they weren't hiring teachers. It was kind of in a little bit of a lull. So I was actually a substitute teacher for close to 3 years before I landed a permanent teaching spot. And when I did land that permanent teaching spot, I actually worked part-time for 2 years, because I don't want to say that I was selective in what I wanted or where I wanted to work, but I definitely had an idea of what I wanted to set my career up to look like. So I didn't just jump in with both feet at any school that would take me. I kind of reserved a little bit, because I knew once I got to the place where I ultimately wanted to be, I wanted to stay there for a while. So it took me a little while, but I definitely think that shaped the kind of teacher that I am, because I've gotten to pull and learn from so many different experiences and from so many different people that, you know, a 22-year-old fresh out of college maybe wouldn't have had if they didn't have the kind of jumbled up journey that I had.
Well, and it's funny you like refer to it as a jumbled up journey, but to me, it's like you were along the way, like finding what was right for you. And I think I've heard my mom refer to it the same way. It's like we expect teachers to just like, and maybe if I'm speaking out of turn, I'm speaking the wrong way, but sometimes it's like teachers to get what they get and be appreciative. And so the fact that you went in and you were like, okay, I really want to find a right role and right space, it's like, that's how it should be, you know, So,
and when I graduated college, and I had this piece of paper that said, okay, go out and teach the youth of America, I didn't feel ready. I kind of didn't want to do a bad job.
No,
I didn't.
I think every teacher, it's like every teacher is like, I think it's just we have teachers growing up that were like, oh my gosh, I love this teacher. Or, oh my gosh, this teacher wasn't the greatest experience. And so you probably went in when you were like, I want to be the good experience.
And I also didn't want to waste kids' time. It's, time is so valuable, and we only have 180 some odd days to really shape their experience for the year. And I just knew that if I went straight out of the gate from college and jumped in, I would not have done as good a job if I didn't wait the few years that I waited. And I had the benefit of doing that. Obviously not everyone could wait and not make a salary right away, but for me, it was something that I was able to kind of swing for a little while.
Yeah. And, you mentioned that you were pulling and learning from others along the way. Other lessons that you were like, man, I really appreciate that I was in this position when I was starting out versus being 22. I'm thinking about being a teacher.
So my first job right when I finished school. So when you finish your degree and then you finish the certification process, you student teach. So I was put into a school. I student taught in an 8th grade, and I actually student taught in the school where I'm currently teaching right now. So that's been a really cool experience too. And, I spent 16 weeks with those kids, but 16 weeks it goes by in the blink of an eye. I was there from the beginning of the school year till Christmas. Yeah. And after that, it's like, I could have went out and found a job, maybe a mid-year hire in January, but that's when I said to myself, no, wait the year, wait till June, kind of rev it up over the summer. And in that first kind of January to June portion is when I started subbing. And that's when I really found that to learn, you have to do. And that's something that I try to show my students as well. You're not going to just learn from sitting and looking at something. You have to physically make yourself do it. So when I was subbing, I was going into, and I teach reading and writing. Yeah. So I was not only going into reading and writing classrooms, I was in math, I was in science, I was in the gym, I was in the health room. I mean, I was doing all kinds of things, and I was learning from all different kinds of teachers, not just the teachers that, taught my subject per se. Yeah. And it really, that's the thing that I tell new and up and coming teachers the most. It's like, if you have 2 periods of your day that you're not teaching, go into someone else's classroom, and don't go into another language arts teacher's classroom, go into a math teacher's classroom, go into a science teacher's classroom, because they're going to do things so differently. And that's the only way that you're going to maybe think outside the box a little bit.
Man, there's so many nuggets. I'm furiously writing down all these different nuggets. So I'm sure that to go back to the, when you were subbing, were you subbing at the same school, or were you subbing in other places? Were you able to build relationships with those teachers kind of throughout? And what did that teach you along the way?
So I started subbing in one district because I did want to keep it small at that point. I didn't want to kind of be driving everywhere and not knowing where I was going every day. So I started subbing in one district that I was familiar with. I had an aunt of mine who worked in that district for 30 years in the school office. Yeah. So I was familiar with the building just from going with her to their school play and setting up with her over the summer and things like that. So I started actually subbing in that school. I subbed in that school and then one other in the district for about a week. And then within that week, the middle school principal hired me full time just to sub in their building.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I was in the middle school. They had a STEM program. Okay. Which they were piloting. I think it was the 2nd or 3rd year. And they took 225 kids out of the middle school, moved them into a wing of the high school in the town. And they had super specialized, smaller classes. It was a small faculty. So that's where I really got to, decide what I wanted to do every single day when I was busy. So that's why, working in a faculty of 25, you really become close with those people. So I was in everyone's room all the time, sitting in the back, taking notes, helping them. Even when the teachers were there, they just knew that I was a fixture in the building. So that's really where I learned the most and found that okay, middle school is where it's at. Middle school is what I want to do for a while. And like I said, I was there for almost 3 years before I knew it was time to spread my wings a little bit and then go out there and find a home. And that's how I ended up back at the school that I started in the first place. And so it's a weird journey that took me back to where I started. But all things considered, I think it was exactly the journey that
meant to be. To take. Yeah. Well, I think that, and what you're saying is really making me think about, you said to learn, you have to do it. And it's how many times in our lives are there things that we're we want to learn this, but actually doing it seems really scary. In the beginning, did you have feelings of this is overwhelming? Or how did you work through any feelings that you had when you started out?
So when my current school hired me, they hired me as what they call a 0.4. So a full-time teacher is a 1.0, and then it kind of decreases by 2. So a 0.4, I taught 2 classes. And it was really interesting to find my way in being a part of that school, but only being there for 2.5 hours a day, because that's all I was contracted to be there for. Yeah. But I right away knew this is where I wanted to end up. So I went above and beyond. I was there all day, every day, even though I was only teaching those 2 classes. But it definitely was an adjustment. It's, walking into the building and not knowing where I was going to be every day, when every other teacher has their own classroom and you're only there to teach 2 classes. They're not giving you a classroom.
Yeah.
So it was very much like making friends and finding a teacher who took me in and gave me like the little corner of her room and gave me my own desk, which like is something
it matters.
So insignificant, but I cried over not having a desk for like 2 weeks. And finally, the head of the department, who is actually the friend of mine that I went into the city with yesterday, realized like, okay, no, she has a point. Like she needs a home. So she found me a desk and set me up and gave me a little corner. And I'll always remember that little corner as like my first home in the building. But that was definitely the biggest obstacle right away, was finding my place in the school when I was really only a part-timer.
It's funny. I feel like there's so many, we are talking about your teaching experience, but there's so many nuggets. It's like, I'm thinking about this. It's like finding your place or finding your home. And may that be at work or in a new relationship or in a family. Like you got to find your little fit. And sometimes it's really terrifying.
It's terrifying. Like I have friends who have started new jobs since the pandemic that have not met a single coworker that they work with
in person.
And that to me is terrifying. But what I anticipate their feeling is kind of what I felt in the beginning too. It's like, you have to just put yourself out there, and you have to make not only my students know that I was going to be a permanent fixture in their lives, even though they saw me for an hour a day, but also the people that I worked with. I wanted them to know, like, I'm going to chaperone the school dance. I'm going to make a fool out of myself in the fashion show, in the talent show. Like, I'm going to do all of these things, even though I'm not spending all day with you like the other teachers are. So that lasted 2 years. And they were a rocky 2 years, because at the end of both of the years, I received a pink slip that basically was like, yeah, you have no job next year. Stay tuned. We'll let you know. Hopefully we can save you. It has nothing to do with your performance. It's just all like budgetary. But thankfully, both of those pink slips were shredded by August, and I had a place to go back to. And then the third year is when they were able to hire me full time. So that is why this year coming up, when I walk into the building in 2 weeks or so, I will officially have tenure, which is really exciting. And that just means that they can't get rid of me. Which just for someone who has had like this kind of journey, it's really like that just solidifies the fact that I made it and I can breathe for a little while. So that's really exciting.
That must be really exciting. And it's, it sounds like along the way that you've been able to kind of take in new approaches and take in things that you learned along the way. Is there something now that as you're starting your 6th year, you're like, I'm really excited about this, or I'm going to scrap this? Like, how do you approach it with a new, fresh idea every single year?
That's something that's really hard.
Yeah.
Because we get kind of in the rut, and the rut happens quickly in teaching because
it happens to everyone. Like in my job, I'm like, oh, can I reuse the same email I used last year? So like, I'm going to take your advice.
So obviously our curriculum doesn't change. It changes very infrequently. It changes probably once every 5 years, I want to say. I mean, we pull new things in here and there, but like the core of what I have to teach the 100 kids that are put in front of me in the beginning of September never changes. So that is what I don't think people that are not in the education world realize, that it kind of could be Groundhog Day. And I teach 5 classes. So I do the same thing 5 times a day. So it's like acting. It's putting on a show, because it's like,
this is the most exciting thing.
Like I can make the same joke at 7:30 in the morning that I'm making at 2:30 in the afternoon, and the laughs are going to be different, but it's the same thing. Okay. So I would definitely say the more that I pull in from things that I've learned on Instagram or on blogs or honestly on TikTok, are the ways that I keep it new and fresh for me. And the easiest way I find is just to, since I teach reading, is just to pull in a ton of short stories, because they're short and fast. And they are what I can use to kind of like freshen up when I'm in the monotony of the day to day of like, we're reading the same novel that I've read already 5 times the last 5 years.
You're like, I can't.
Or doing the same grammar practice or things like that. So short stories are where I really, for me personally, I find a lot of the opportunity to bring in originality in my teaching. And my school is really big. So there are like 6 other teachers that are teaching the same thing that I'm teaching.
Okay.
And theoretically, we're all doing the same thing at the same time, but that's not happening. We're all fresh and new and tailoring it to what we like. And, you know, what my coworker across the hall is doing every single day is not matching up what I'm doing every single day. And that's the beauty that we have, is we get to kind of choose what works best for us. Yeah. And we have a little bit of flexibility and freedom to kind of decide what's going to work best for our own students.
I think what like is kind of coming through is like, how can we all freshen up our approach? I mean, I think it's hard, and I know we're going to delve into the pandemic shortly. I know everyone's so excited to talk about it even more, but it's like, just like a nugget that is kind of going in my brain is like, how can we freshen up our approach? Because it sounds like you're like, okay, I know that I have to do X, but Y can change. And I think there's so many things that even when we have a pandemic, like we can try to think about freshening up that email that I was just thinking about, or like whatever it may be. So I feel like that's a really good little nugget that we can leave the people.
Yeah, for sure.
So you talked about in the pre-show prep how you have to adapt and grow and change. Because of the pandemic, have you felt like that has been an overdrive in the last year? Like, what has that experience been like?
It has been probably, and I'm going to only say probably because no one knows what the future holds, but it has probably been the hardest thing that I will ever do in my career, in my professional life. But at the same time, and I've said this a handful of times and people have kind of looked at me sideways, I'm almost grateful for it in the sense that it has made me change and adapt and grow in ways that I don't think I would have if it didn't happen.
100%. I feel like I don't
think that I would be as technologically involved.
Same.
in a good way. And I also don't think that I would be going out and looking for the new and the fun and innovative as much as I am now. I think I still would a little bit, but I think that the pandemic kind of kicked that into high gear because we had no choice but to make it happen.
So when you first went in, like in March of last year, did y'all transition pretty quickly to virtual? Like, did you get like a date notice? Like, I feel like no time. I feel like teachers were just like expected the next day to be like, okay, you need to be proficient in Zoom. And it's like, Zoom is not easy.
No. So I'm going to honestly look at the calendar because I can tell you the exact day. So
is it Friday, March 13th?
We went home on Friday, March 13th.
Never forget, everyone.
Never forget. And they told us, stay tuned. We'll let you know what's going to happen. And I mean, we sent kids home with nothing. We sent them home with their computers, maybe if they decided to take them home from their lockers. We didn't send them home with books or materials or anything because we were just going on a 2-week vacation. Yeah. We're just going to be home for 2 weeks. And at that point, the month of March in the school world, it's like the hellish month of the school year, honestly, because there are no interruptions. It's a month where you look at the calendar and there are 4 or 5 day weeks. There is not a half day. There is not a professional development day. There is not a holiday. We are going to school 5 days a week for 4 weeks. So when we had all of this kind of erupt in front of us, we all kind of looked at each other like, oh, we're going to get a little break in March. Like, this might be nice.
I think everyone was thinking that.
Yeah. And we went out, teachers went out, as teachers normally do, for happy hour on that Friday. And it was kind of like eerie because we didn't want to be excited to be home for a little while, but we also were like, this is going to be kind of nice. And so it was kind of like a really weird.
None of us had any idea that we would be watching Tiger King on repeat.
None of it. And baking all the bread and knitting all the things.
I did it.
I mean, obviously working out online and meeting new friends.
Shout out Home Turf again. First class free, you know.
But after that, you know, when there was finally communication to all of us, things were really challenging because legally we could not go camera to camera with our students. So because of like child privacy laws, We couldn't Zoom right away, and we used Google. So we could not Google Meet right away because in a normal society before a pandemic.
Yeah, you think about that. It's like you would have never been allowed to be like.
No, that's like the going joke for the past 2 years. It's like kids never thought their teachers had a first name, let alone like to see inside their apartment. Yeah, to see inside their homes and like to see their pets and their like things like that. So for a while, it was really like haphazardly thrown together. And what I personally did, because I didn't feel comfortable going on camera right away, so I was really doing an asynchronous way of teaching. So I was posting work and the kids were doing the work, and then I was commenting on the work and doing everything virtual, typing back and forth, and not really any video.
Yeah.
Other teachers did recordings of just themselves and posted those recordings, and the kids could watch them because we could go out, but the kids couldn't come back in. So we could record ourselves, and we could video record, audio record, anything like that, but there couldn't ever be the open lines of communication from us to them for that.
Was that a state thing at the time, or was that like a federal? Like, I probably should know this because I have many a friend that had kids at home, but like, I just remember it was all like, let's not talk about it.
I mean, it's definitely in Connecticut. I can tell you that, because even I have friends, you know, teachers, you're all friends with teachers. So I have friends in all different districts, and no one was doing live instruction to their classes for the first half of the year. And it was honestly not great. The kids didn't get anything. No, I shouldn't say anything, but the kids did not get a lot out of it. It's
hard. I mean,
they really missed out on half of their school year, and things were scary at that time. So it really, you know, there was no weight held to any of the work that was being done. It was kind of just like, get it in, turn it back in, and then we'll kind of just give you a thumbs up that you did it. But, you know, grades weren't a big deal at that point.
Yeah.
Participation really fell by the wayside because we couldn't force them to do anything.
Well, it's hard, like when you don't know about like their Wi-Fi or if there's only one computer. Like there's so many things that we just like, we're like, okay, get on a computer. It's like in my household growing up, it was like one computer. Like that was not, if there's multiple kids, like I was just like, I don't know. And there's just so many things that you get from like when a teacher's asking you a question and you like look to your person next to you and you're like, did I totally miss the lesson? Like they missed out on that.
So true. It's so true.
In the awkward fashion, my middle school days were, you know, marked by, maybe I'll post a photo when we do this, when we have this.
I almost was going to suggest because it's almost too good to be true. But
blue glittery jeans that I just thought was it on a stick. We can talk about that another time.
I'll find one for you. We can post them side by side.
Guys, everyone get excited and think back to your middle school days. But I just don't, I mean, thinking back to that time, like everyone was like so scared just to go to the grocery store. Like, I don't know how kids were taking all of that stress in and, you know.
Yeah. And still trying to listen to like the 4,000 things I was posting every day on their like Google Classroom. So really like it served its purpose from March until June of that year. And then we knew when we were coming back in the fall of 2020 that things needed to be different. So that's when this whole like hybrid learning kind of took off.
Yeah.
So we started school in August of 2020. And we started in a hybrid model. So we had half of the kids Mondays and Tuesdays. We had the other half Thursdays and Fridays. We were all virtual on Wednesdays. Okay. But while we had those halves sitting in front of us, we also had the other half at home.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So you're like, I'm going to teach you and also type.
Yeah. So I attribute it to what I think running a spaceship must be, because it was like, I had a tripod camera, I had my Chromebook camera, I had my desktop computer, I had 20 kids looking at me on a screen. And at this point, we got all the laws taken care of. So we could actually interact with them. But then I also had like 15 kids sitting in front of me in my physical classroom, masks on, anxiety's high, tensions like running wild. Not to mention just like normal middle school nonsense and hormones and stress and anxiety and all the things.
Please don't take me back.
Yeah, but it really was like a spaceship. It was like like my principal used to walk in and just laugh hysterically because I used to say, welcome to my command center, because it was like 3 screens, a computer, a tripod camera, me usually with like headphones and my mask and screaming so that they can hear me underneath it. And the kids sitting in front of me spaced out looking like, where am I? What am I doing? How am I starting middle school this way? Those kids had never stepped foot in the building.
Oh my gosh.
It was wild. It sounds like war. Like it sounds like a war story.
You're like, is it NASA or is it Morgan Mancini's classroom?
We'll
never know. We'll never know.
Never know. And that lasted until about Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And then they sent us all home and we were home for a while. So then it was like the transition back out again. And while we were home, we did go virtual to virtual because we did get, all of those laws taken care of. So it was me sitting exactly where you're looking at me right now.
Very cute background, guys.
Yeah.
Very
doing like the dog and pony show from my bedroom, but that was not what was best for those kids. So we got back in as soon as we could and we went back into the hybrid half and half. But what we noticed is that some kids were choosing to stay home because they were nervous or scared. And then we were inviting some kids in for the 4 days that we were in person because we physically needed them there because they were slipping through the cracks. And then by April, we had all kids back in. I would say we were about 90% full. We had some kids that obviously opted to stay home for the whole year, but we were in and masked and safe as safe could be. And we really made the most out of it for the end of last year.
That feels like we've lived 7 years. And you think about it, it's like, you talked about this in like the pre-show prep of like kids are resilient, but it's like, I can't imagine like, as you're saying, these kids started middle school like this. Like, what do you think that the kids are like? How are they going to change? Like, what is it like for them? Like, how do y'all kind of adapt to try to make it as, I hate to use the word normal because I don't think anything is ever normal, but as normal as possible for them?
There are kids who are going to come out of the next, I would say 2 years. And I'm going to give that number some weight, but not a lot of weight because we've seen, our country go a little backwards in the last couple of weeks. But I would say in 2 years, I think there are going to be a group of kids who are so leaps and bounds ahead of where they would have been if this never happened. But there are going to be even more kids that are just so incredibly far behind. And because we've never experienced anything like this that we could ever, think back to, we are just pushing those kids along for right now. And as much as we can all sit here and say like, that's not the right thing to do, we're not giving them anything by just letting them go and making things harder and harder as they move on and not kind of backtracking and helping them in the deficits that they have. We can't have a 16-year-old in 7th grade. We need them to kind of just move on. And I think that our country and our education system are going to kind of have to change and adapt over the next probably 5 years, 10 years because of these gaps that we're seeing.
And you think about it even before, it's like, I think about like, high school, and I know high school is like kind of changing. Maybe I'm just thinking back to my experience of like, I never learned what like taxes were.
No.
Or like the DMV or like, I feel like these kids are getting a crash course in like life. And like, maybe that's a good thing, but also like, oh man, we're again, and we started at the beginning. Teachers are heroes. Like we're asking these teachers to do something in 6 hours a day, or 7 hours a day that like there's 18 other hours in the day. And yes, they should be sleeping, but you know what I'm saying? Like
we're asking kids to do so much.
Yes.
And that's why taking a step back from all of the madness and all of the stuff that we have to do, on paper has been my biggest takeaway over the last year. And like I said earlier, I have my curriculum. I have what I have to get through. I have the content and the standards that I have to hit, but I also have 100 kids who have been in a mask for 2 years or have been stuck at home and forced inside, that if it's 70 degrees outside on a May afternoon, I'm taking them outside.
Yeah.
And I walked through
kids
Target
can be
earlier.
kids, you know?
Yeah, I walked through Target earlier today and they had a ton of their summer stuff on clearance. And I made a mental note in my head and I said, come back. I'm not ready to really think about going back yet, even though it's fastly approaching, but I said, come back in the next couple of days because I need to buy all new chalk and footballs and
bubbles and like all these things,
like things like that you're like a person who's not in the world that I'm in will say, oh, really? An 11-year-old, a 12-year-old is going to play with chalk and bubbles?
No.
I cannot tell you the excitement that came on those kids' faces when it started to get nice out and we all started to go outside because it was the one place where we could take our masks off and we could see our whole face and to see their expressions. And the crazy thing is we have kids who we said this all year last year that looked so different with their masks on versus without their masks on that if we saw them like pre-pandemic or post-pandemic with no mask on, we wouldn't recognize them. So we really said we said we are going outside. I'm saying we, like my little teachers, but like we all decided that our content can wait, our standards can wait, our, math problems and tests and quizzes, they could all wait. When those nice days popped up all last year, we were out and we were having fun and playing and letting them be kids because they've had so much robbed of their childhood.
I mean, that's like, I'm, getting teary, but it's like, that's what matters. Like for teachers, like we need more teachers like Morgan, like let it be her first, because it's like, I think we all have gotten stuck sometimes in the last year of being like, we need to do this, but it's like, sometimes we just need to like color or, I have a niece and nephew and I'm just like, sometimes I'm like, they grew up and they like it was normal for masks. Like it blows my mind.
Yeah. It's just really sad. It's really heartbreaking, but that's like, it's a metaphor for everything. And this is what I've loved so much about listening to your podcast over the last few weeks is that, you've interviewed all of these people who are not in any world. Like I'm like the one I'm talking about right now, but there's like this common thread woven through. And it's like, we all have realized that we just need to take a step back and we need to look at the bigger picture and we need to just start, thinking about things differently and having more fun and thinking outside the box and taking the good that comes with all the bad.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm going to continue for as long as I work until the day I retire, which is probably going to be never. But
I feel like teachers don't ever want to retire because there's always another student.
There is. Yeah, there is.
Well, I so appreciate that. That has just always been my hope is like that someone it's not to negate, like this has been the wildest year that we never asked for. But I think that my hope is someone leaves feeling a little more full and they can be better in their own lives. And I feel like that's kind of like a perfect way to end this puppy. Thank you so much. Teachers are heroes, full stop. I am so glad we got to talk through her experience over the last year and what teaching has taught her both professionally and personally. If you liked, please share, subscribe, leave a review, and join me next week for another episode of the Your Good News podcast.